President, members and guests. As you know, I regularly fill in, so I've done a very good sergeant session this morning. I know Russ Ballard couldn't make it today. I'm sure he apologised and he'll pay dearly for that. My understanding is he was Chancellor of Massey University, so I thought we better have a university theme. Last time a sergeant didn't show up, I took a law theme. Peter Cullen, it cost you a fortune.
You never paid though.
No. Yeah. Actually, we had a good lawyer theme, so he had to pay. So, first of all, anyone that went to Massey can stand up. Cool, you can all pay. I went to Massey as well. Any of you have a sheep in your room in the dorm ever? Because if you did, you can pay double. I hear recently Victoria University's made quite a spectacular investment on some wonderful architecture on the terrace. So if you'd want to see that pulled down, can you please put some money in the kitty? Wonderful piece of architecture. So who has a degree? Put your hand up. Cool. So all of you have earned a hell of a lot, I suspect, more by having a degree than if you'd had a trade. So you can all put some money in the fund, please. Are there any doctors in the room? Stand up if you've got a doctorate. Well done. Was it worth it? Yep. So you can all pay a bit more. Again, who's got a BA? Anyone with a BA? Was that worth it? Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Now I'm getting into trouble. Finally, I see that being honest about benefit fraud really doesn't pay. So really, if any of you have ever got away with a crime and not been caught, can you please pay?
I'm so pleased to be part of the theme for today, actually, Focus on Youth. Hands up those of you who have children under 30. That's not bad, is it? She says, I'm surprised. And those of you who have grandchildren. Wow, interesting. So what I realised is that when I'm sitting with my colleagues at a Rotary lunch table, that I can think that the youth committee, that's a subcommittee of our club, may have no immediate relevance to anyone in the room. But of course you only have to look at that show of hands and think that, as Kerry said, not only do we care a lot about our grandchildren's future because we just love them, but also because they're going to choose our nursing home. Pretty much. So our interest in what our grandchildren do in the workforce is sharpened by the fact that we will be completely dependent on them for our well-being and for our possibly any form of little outings they take us on. Perish the thought. I went with my twin grandchildren to a 5-year-old birthday party at Chipmunks in West Auckland yesterday. Yeah. If you want some, I think my son said as we drove away, he thinks you could describe it as the 7th circle of hell. Is that how it goes? It was just unbelievable sensory overload. Anyway, if that's what the kind of 5 to 8-year-old scene are doing, then watch out for the future, frankly. It was just ghastly. It was just awful. Okay. So Patrick, I press the right-hand button. Look at that. So the beginning of this presentation I've talked through before, but just very quickly, the Youth Committee has got a fabulous membership of about 7 or 8 club members, always keen to have more. And my participation in board initiatives around strategic planning over the last few months has reminded me that every committee has very porous boundaries. And as we pull something together, some kind of event or some initiative on behalf of each committee, we are all absolutely able to look at our other Rotary colleagues to help out. So the Youth Committee is an open invitation to come along. And currently the meeting tonight is drinks at the Wellesley Club. So part of Wellesley Hotel, rather. So part of what we're doing is looking at initiatives around youth in the Wellington and wider community and saying which are the right ones for this club to support. So rather than take on stuff on our own behalf, you know, that we start from scratch, what are the things that we need to be doing as a club that might support existing initiatives? This club should be proud of the initiatives that it has launched on its own behalf, Eureka being a bit of a standout, Singers to Listen For. Do I say Singers to Listen For, John? Yeah, listen, not... Well, I mean, you listen and watch, don't you? But yeah. This club has done a tremendous amount off the bat, you know, from the start. But we're also keen to say what other things are on the go in Wellington that we want to get behind and bring Rotary network and expertise to play for that particular initiative. As you'll know, that we also have quite a wide range of grants and scholarships that Rotary offers, usually at a district level. Some of them are international, and this club has now got a fantastic machine in play, whereas as those fellowships come up, or grants or scholarships or however they're worded, we get behind and make sure that we have some nominations go forward for those. There's a couple that focus on leadership for people at high school, for youngsters at high school level. There's others that support longer courses of study at university and postgraduate level. There's a whole range of stuff going on. To that end, sidebar. So Tony Hassett and others, as you know, have been quite instrumental in setting up a little organisation called Scope. And the members of Scope are in that kind of post-Rotaract age group, but in the early part of their careers. And Tony tells me they're going strong, and they've got a great membership. They've got an email list of 100 people. I go along to their meetings when I can, and they are just impressive. They particularly want to focus on initiatives in the community that have an education or an environmental slant, or preferably a combination of both. So on the youth committee, we'll be looking at where we can team up with them on things that they're interested in, and I have issued them with an invitation to come to our committee meeting tonight. And astonishingly, they're going to come, because they know there's stuff they can do. So I think that with all of these different legs into the community of young people, and I'm kind of saying, you know, high schoolish up to about 30ish, I don't know when you stop being young, we had a question about that a couple of months ago, that with the different pillars that we have in the club at the moment, there's a lot we can do if we pull all of those together. So towards the end of October, Barb and I, where's Barb? Where are you, Barb? Just over here, Barb Lewis, recently returned to our club. Barb and I are organising a Monday evening that focuses actually on those young people who have been associated with the club. And I'm going to organise it as a kind of a reverse mentoring session where Rotarians who come along, we're going to have a keynote speaker first, but then we'll sit and listen to what some of those youngsters are able to tell us is kind of top of mind for them and where they think a club like Rotary might put its energies in the community. Because it's, you know, while we might have children and grandchildren, I'd have to say my experience at Chipmunks yesterday gave me no insights whatsoever into the future of either young people or ourselves. Actually, the divine punishment, wouldn't it be, is that, as Kerry said, when we get to 90 or 100 or whatever we're going to get to, they take us along to Chipmunks and just leave us there. They've got specially padded things, you know. So we're going to run an initiative towards the end of the month. We're inviting all of those young people along. I've talked with Francis. We're going to get the Eureka finalists to come along as well. And in fact, we might ask one of the past finalists and winners of one of the Eureka Awards to be our keynote speaker, because there's some fantastic possibilities there amongst the previous alumni of the Eureka program. But also, we have got this wonderful growing pool of young people who've participated in RILA, the National Science and Technology Forum in Auckland. I've met all of those youngsters in the last 12 months or so, and man, are they impressive. And as I think I might have said previously, the only reason I've left this till October is that every time I've rung them to say, hey look, we're going to do something on a Monday evening, and one of them will say, off to Nepal with school. When I was at school, we went to Tawa College, I think. No, Mana College, or Palmerston North if you were lucky. Yeah. So we're going to organise an evening, and as a committee, I really want us to be looking at what more can we do to harness the energies and the interests and the understanding, actually, of those young people that we already have an engagement with, along with those of our club. So that's where the Youth Committee's up to, and now I'm going to hand over to your next 5-minute speaker. Thank you.
Well, he can keep his job if he keeps on calling me young man. Look, I've been asked to introduce myself. In some respects, this feels slightly false. I know many of you, and Denise, when she introduced me, just about covered 5 minutes of my history anyway. For those that I already know and know well, you probably want me to explain myself rather than introduce myself, but let me have a go. Let me give you a bit of sense about what I do now, what I used to do for a career, and what I like to do to have fun. So these days, I'm, I call myself a sort of a director and sometimes a lowly paid consultant. I've got a number of directorships with private sector companies, and I do quite a lot of work across the public sector, which is my background. I've taken up a role on the Vulnerable Children's Board, overseeing this transition to a new way of trying to look after some of the most vulnerable in our society, through to managing some things with corrections and their major outsourced contracts. So quite a wide variety of issues. But one of the jobs that I've inherited since I've been in this new state is I took over from Kerry as the executive chair of the festival in this city, something which is fantastic and iconic, big part of living here. Kerry didn't have to work that hard over coffee to persuade me to do it, and it is something which is fantastic for me and for many others to get involved in. I'm trying to do things that motivate me. I'm trying to put something back into the community, so I've got the options often to be able to pick and choose and do the things that I really like. I'm doing quite a lot of work in Christchurch. I grew up in Christchurch. I've been doing a lot of work on the regeneration process, and I spent 6 months last year chairing a working party about reinstating the Christchurch Cathedral. I felt like a line out of the Blues Brothers. I'm on a mission from God. Still haven't quite got there. Now that's what I'm doing now. What I used to do is I had a career in the public sector. The last 8 years, until I stepped down about 18 months ago, I was the CEO of the transport agency, and Alan's here today. He was one of my group managers. That was a job to bring together disparate parts of the transport sector into one cohesive whole. It happened to coincide with a massive uplift in transport investment. So we had about a $3.5 billion investment portfolio every year, and the job was basically to optimise that across a whole lot of public transport, roading and cycling developments across the country. And some of those projects we're seeing roll out now. You can just think of the Kapiti Coast here as one of the key elements of that. And it wasn't just about investment in transport projects, it was also trying to lift the quality of the broader regulatory environment. So such things as moving that old 6-monthly warrant of fitness system into a much more modern context was part of that. Prior to that, I was the CEO of the Ministry of Economic Development for 7 or 8 years, at a time when we were looking at a much more active approach to industry policy, in the early 2000s. MED was one of the largest government policy shops, big interface with business, involved in everything from tourism through to negotiating parts of the trade deal with China, and I did a number of trips to China during those years as well. And before that, I spent 15 or 16 years in the Treasury, and the last 6 or 7 years as one of the Deputy Secretaries to the Treasury with Peter Bushnell. I don't think Peter's here today. But that was, I actually went to the Treasury for a year in 1984 at the beginning of that sort of economic reform period, and somehow got stuck there for the next 15 or 16 years because it was such an interesting time. And if anybody who needs advice about how to drink whiskey with Winston Peters, I can give you all sorts of stories about the years when he was Treasurer and 3 o'clock in the morning in Bill Birch's office drinking something or other. I started my working life actually alongside Roger Blakely and actually Denise too, in the Ministry of Works, again dealing with sort of resource development projects and regional development. What I do for fun when I'm not thinking about work, well, I've got a passion for the performing arts, and that's the linkage to the festival. But I like to play outdoors. I've been a keen tramper and skier, although I probably don't do quite as much of that as I used to, but I'm a very keen mountain biker. And I'm off next month to bike the Heafy track with a good couple of mates of mine. So that's sort of like tramping on wheels for me. I'm a keen traveller, overseas traveller, and if I'm not on a trip, I'm normally planning the next one. And being able to combine cycling and travel is my current passion. I did a big cycle tour of Vietnam last year, from most of the way from Hanoi to Saigon over several weeks, and I'm off to Europe to do some cycling next year. So if I'm not bobbing up and down here on who's going and who's coming, I've somehow missed the plot. So that's me. Nice to meet you all. Thank you very much.